It's a great pleasure to welcome you all this morning.
The Israel-US-Iran war is raging everywhere. It is happening in the Indian Ocean, some part of the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, Hormuz Strait, Oman Sea, and we all felt as members of the Society for Indian Ocean Studies, which have been engaged in the studies of the Indian Ocean for last more than 3 decades, almost 4 decades, we could hold a discussion on this very important topic which is engaging the world attention. Well, Hormuz Strait actually is at the center stage of the current crisis. And Hormuz, in fact, under the UNCLOS, is a strait where, under the provisions of the transit passage, which enables movement of global trade without any hindrance, and this cannot be stopped, today is really faced with a dilemma, because you have certain provisions of international law which just do not permit the closure of body of water. After all, it is just a small stretch of water, only 21 miles to 37 nautical miles, I think kilometers, out of the large, vast Indian Ocean. But Iran has used it as a strategic lever. I think in the kind of circumstances they are placed in, they probably find that there is no other option but to utilize this as a kind of a check on Americans. And as a result, you have a situation where bulk of the supplies of oil, nearly 20% of oil from the Gulf region which goes to the world, is blocked. Along with that, LPG, LNG, fertilizers, propylene, a huge amount of material which Gulf supplies to the rest of the world. Along with that, the attacks by Iran on the Gulf states has created a new dimension. So you have a situation in which a crisis between Iran and US and Israel has now spilled over to the rest of the world, and at the moment, as things appear, there doesn't seem to be a clear and ready solution. After the Pakistan talks which failed, the American President Trump has now gone with another of his bizarre ideas. He has now blockaded the Hormuz Strait. And that means the ships which are already in the in the Persian Gulf, that is the US fleet, one fleet at Bahrain, those ships, along with other countries, numerous ships are on one side, and other ships in the Oman Sea. And the Iranians have threatened with use of missiles, mines, and so on. So the crisis continues. The President Trump said yesterday that the war is almost over. I heard an Israeli spokesperson on TV. She says no, war is yet to be over. So at the moment we are confronted with a situation where the end doesn't seem to be in sight, and how this is going to now play out is a question before us. We have also, in our today's seminar, apart from Hormuz Crisis, thought of another dimension, namely the Indian Ocean countries, how they will suffer from this, or what is the future for them in this whole crisis. Well, I think energy security has become the principal concern for rest of the world. And in the South Asia region, this is very acutely felt. if the war continues for a few more days, I do not know whether we in India will be in a position to really maintain our present level of oil supplies as well as LPG and LNG. And even if the price level at the moment is retained, I don't know whether that will be viable in the future. So there are various options available, whether we can in future diversify our sources of oil, use more of renewable energy. Well, I don't think there are a number of issues at the moment connected with the oil supplies, and nothing is very clear as to how we can deal with that. Security of Gulf states will be another problem, because they have seen that despite the US security umbrella over them for last 40-50 years, they could not really resist what Iran did to them. So that is a big question, and given India's deep interest in the Persian Gulf, our huge commitments, also our trade volume with countries in the region, the presence of nearly 9 to 10 million expatriates, their remittances, I think for India this is going to be a huge, almost insurmountable question. So we are caught into all this, and we are looking for the future, possible solutions, and in fact pondering every day what the man from the White House comes up with. So I think in this situation, it is probably best for us to think about various possibilities. And today we are invited an excellent panel. We have Dr. Sanjay Baru, I think who needs no introduction. He is a very eminent journalist, editor-in-chief of leading business newspapers in the country, including Business Standards, Secretary General of India's prestigious Chamber of Commerce, FICCI, visiting professor in India as well as abroad, and media advisor to the former Prime Minister. So we have a man who writes very copiously in the news media, reflects on his views on the international issues, and we thought today we can have Dr. Baru to give his thoughts and views on this very important question facing all of us. So with this, over to you, Dr. Baru.
The first time I was associated with the Society for Indian Ocean Studies was after the 98 nuclear tests, when Admiral Roy led a Track 2 delegation to Japan. Uday Bhaskar, myself were the members. 3 of us went to Japan to convince the Japanese that they should also go nuclear. That was the message we gave them, that rather than sanction us, that it was in their interest to go nuclear. And that was the last time I participated in a Society of Indian Ocean Studies program. I have attended a few after that, but I'm grateful to you for inviting me today. I have been spending a lot of time in the last year or so in Hyderabad, away from Delhi. So I'm more of an outside observer on many of these issues. I don't attend these seminars, conferences that are happening regularly in Delhi. But I'm glad to see some young people here, because my biggest concern in the recent past, behind us, is because a lot of the discourse on Indian strategic policy happening in various think tanks, most of them funded by a range of Western outfits, has, in my judgment, been excessively influenced by American and European thinking. Even the columns in the media, it is really quite disturbing to see the extent to which external influence has come to bear on a lot of thinking and writing in this country. um, I've been given about 10 to 12 minutes, so I have a prepared text which I will read and then maybe make some remarks later, particularly on the issue of energy and energy strategy that I have not referred to in this, but in the next session. First of all, we have titled today's seminar as India and the Hormuz Crisis, but as has been explained by Mr. Devare in his remarks just now, this is more than a Hormuz crisis. And what is happening in the Gulf is a reflection of fundamental geopolitical shifts with consequences for regional stability in Asia. Iran's decision to alter the status of the Strait of Hormuz reflects a new and emerging balance of power in West Asia. It is also a consequence of a reassertion of US and Israeli imperial interests in West Asia and the Levant. It is necessary for India to acknowledge that both the United States and Israel have sought to destabilize West Asia, and the Hormuz crisis, so to speak, is a consequence of their actions with implications for Indian Ocean security. US attempt to blockade access to Iranian ports is a direct threat to energy security of many Asian economies, including China, Japan, and India. As an energy exporting economy today, the US is attempting to secure control over global energy flows to the detriment of energy importing economies of Asia. Even if the objective is to hurt China, India will suffer collateral damage, as has already been seen in the sphere of mercantilized trade. For decades, India took the view that it wishes to ensure that the Indian Ocean is a zone of peace. We were clear in our minds that we did not want the conflicts that marked the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and continue to define maritime security in these two oceans to shape regional security in the Indian Ocean region. We and the Indian Ocean littoral states wanted big power rivalries to be kept out of the Indian Ocean. Situated as we are at the top of this body of water, we have always believed that it is our duty to keep the Indian Ocean free of conflict and big power rivalry. While the present government has stayed this course with initiatives such as Sagar and Mahasagar, it has been more vocal on the activities of China in the Indian Ocean region, while maintaining discreet silence on those of Western powers, especially the United States. Recent events have foregrounded the questionable role of Western powers, and India must speak up. In the most recent articulation of the Indian view at an Indian Ocean conference in Maldives, the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar reiterated India's Sagar and Mahasagar policy and the idea that all states of the region should remain jointly committed to ensuring that the Indian Ocean remains free of conflict. To quote Mr. Jaishankar, "Here is the truth that we cannot avoid. There is a full-blown conflict that is today deeply impacting all nations of the Indian Ocean. Moreover, there are gray zone activities that span the spectrum between the traditional and the non-traditional. We also saw and we all felt the consequences when shipping in the Red Sea was disrupted in the last few years. So the bottom line is that the spectrum of challenges has become wider and more seamless, and unfortunately also more serious. Our stewardship cannot ignore this. No single Indian Ocean state, however capable, can preserve and protect the maritime space alone. The complex challenges demand a shared commitment. One that is rooted in cooperation and transparency, and above all in respect for international law. We must view the Indian Ocean as a global commons, where not only the benefits are shared, but so too other responsibilities. Our efforts must be pursued through strong institutional networks." Unquote. It is, however, unfortunate that the Foreign Minister did not state clearly who is responsible for bringing conflict to the Indian Ocean region. Two recent incidents draw attention to the negative role of the United States in the Indian Ocean region. First, the torpedo attack by a US submarine on an Iranian naval vessel. In the past, we have often objected to big power rivalry in the region, India rejected the presence of a US aircraft carrier in the Bay of Bengal in 1971, yet the foreign minister chose to remain silent on the US torpedo attack on a naval vessel of a member country of the Indian Ocean Rim Association that was in fact traversing the Indian Ocean as a guest of India. Second, the use of Diego Garcia by the United States in staging attacks on Iran. The recent US-Israel campaign against Iran not only saw a US naval attack on Iran in the Indian Ocean, but also attempts to use US bases in the Indian Ocean to attack Iran and service ships engaged in US offensives. Iranian decision to aim a missile at Diego Garcia was a consequence. The decision of Britain to walk back on its commitment with respect to the status of the Chagos Islands under pressure from the United States is an affront to both Mauritius and India that have pursued the decolonization of the islands. By referring to the Quadrilateral Security Initiative, Quad, as, quote, a platform relevant to the Indian Ocean region, unquote, and also to initiatives taken with reference to the Indian Ocean, to the Indo-Pacific, the foreign minister appears to have absolved the United States of any responsibility in bringing conflict from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. The Quad is nothing but an anti-China coalition. That is how it is viewed. It is odd that we recommend Quad as a relevant platform for the region at a time when the threat to the Indian Ocean security is being posed not by China, but by the actions of the United States and Israel. Of the 4 members of Quad, India is the only independent power. Both Australia and Japan are US allies and remain subservient to the United States. It is unfortunate that India seeks to bring Quad within the framework of Indian Ocean security and development. The foreign minister also referred to initiatives such as the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, IMEC, where India has partnered with Israel and the US as an initiative that would improve connectivity in the Indian Ocean region. This Indian approach against the background of recent conflicts in West Asia is regrettable. The stark reality is that the United States and Israel are singularly responsible for bringing conflict to the Indian Ocean and for promoting outfits like IMEC and I2U2. I2U2, a grouping of India, Israel, United States and UAE, is nothing more than a US attempt to draw India into its strategic game plan for West Asia and the geo-economic containment of China and Iran. Over the past 5 years, 2 successive American administrations, the Biden and Trump administrations, have drawn India into these frameworks, aiming to entangle India into its West Asia game plan. How can India be complicit in all this and yet claim that it seeks to keep the Indian Ocean a zone of peace and that the Indian Ocean is India's ocean, a phrase that in fact the foreign minister used in his recent speech, which has since become a laughable claim? India's defense and intelligence relations with Israel, which is not an Indian Ocean state, are today threatening India's interests in the Indian Ocean region. India's relations with Israel are harming India's relations with West Asia as well as many Indian Ocean littoral states. India's objections to Chinese activity in the Indian Ocean will sound hollow if we do not also object to US and European activity. India has repeatedly stated that it seeks to voice the interests and concerns of the global South. In the Indian Ocean, any defense of the interests of the global South should include the continued questioning of big power presence in the region. Why then do we accept continued US and European presence in the Indian Ocean? Such are the questions relating to our Indian Ocean strategy of Sagar and Mahasagar that are raised by the recent conflict, and these need to be addressed in any attempt to find a solution to the so-called Hormuz crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baru. I think you have clearly stated the current imbroglio and India's position, in what way we find ourselves in kind of a dissonance with some of the policies we have ourselves been stating. I think the floor is open. Would you like to have any comments or any views?
What needs to be said. But the reality is, what does India do? The fact of the matter is that we two highly ambitious powers working in different directions, China and the US, which are neither are satisfied with the growth of Indian power. So I think we should be very clear, one, about our limitations, and two, about where we can use our force. To my mind, our Western neighbor, given to creating problems, worries, and I've been there, lived there, worries about our maritime force. Yeah, therefore, as I said, we can't get into quarrels with either the US or China. It doesn't serve our interests. The Chinese have never eaten up into our interests in shipping or anything else. But perhaps what you have said merits an understanding of the limitations of Indian power. And let's not think because we are growing very fast, faster than anyone else, let us not believe that we control the waves. That is the reality of power. And I think we're trying to do it reasonably well. The 2 aircraft carriers and what have you. Having lived long enough in Pakistan, I can assure you that gives them a lot of sleepless nights. But there is still the Chinese factor. We are also faced with the fact that the Chinese assistance covers everything from nuclear weapons designs down to the needs of the battlefield. So I think basically and this is a prescription for us, should be aware of the limits of our power, the shortcomings of our power, and exercise it quite rightly, because I can assure you, having lived 6.5 years in Pakistan, that they don't worry too much about our Air Force or our Army. They've taken it on. But the Navy to them is an area psychologically they're not used to. But what they will expect is that in that event, they're going to get strong Chinese backing. As I said, even their nuclear weapons designs and their missiles are all Pakistanis. And perhaps you should discuss what that would involve in maritime power.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So, I'm Deepika Saraswat from IDSA. I study Iran and West Asia. So, you spoke about IMEC and I2U2, and it's interesting that still EAM is talking about it, because it made a lot of sense when the Gulf states had a different view of Israel. They were normalizing, and there was a geo-economic logic to these projects. But now when Israel is seen as striving for some kind of a regional hegemon, dominant military power, the Gulf perceptions must have changed as well. So I'm wondering, what is the viability of some, these ambitious projects like IMEC in your understanding?
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you to Dr. Sanjay Baru. In such a sidelined and such a marginalized role, leave alone the fact that we can neither be, China of course we cannot be, and we don't have to mince words. They are our long-term, short-term, long-term adversary, but we have to deal with them, and there are ways in which we can do that. US, we had found, was the natural partner because we have really no bilateral issues of conflict with them, and that they were ready to help us at one point, we thought, to emerge as a major power. Well, all that in 1 year has changed, I think, and from that sweet spot where we are. So, there are just 1 or 2 questions. Prescriptions, there can be many. Strategic autonomy sounds such a hollow word right now, sir. Vis-a-vis this, present situation, and vis-a-vis, I would say, Israel. To me personally, I feel I would be ready to abide if it is to the US that you were taking this kind of a stand. But why with Israel? The question that's come to mind is that are we so dependent on them? And one of the experts on the region said that from Kargil to Operation Sindhur, that means we haven't developed our capabilities since Kargil. Intelligence, surveillance, maybe some other very sophisticated defense equipment, though mainly it is from the US and others that we get it. But at any hand, one is that, sir. And secondly, is there something else? And if I may be bold to say, maybe it is at present the deep ideological affinity between Zionism and Hindutva of the BJP. Actually, they're two very different things, but there is this perception. If you look at the social media, the kind of uproar and support, the wahwahi of the Israelis standing up to the Islamic world, and we are on that side. And last, which is not very elegant to say in a forum like this, are we in the grip of the Mossad? What is it? What kind of a hold are we in? These are actually just questions which go in one's mind, because there's all these sophisticated concepts and everything, but you're so right to point out. There are these conferences taking place, these visits taking place, but nowhere do you hear that for the first time, India, sir, was so much weaker when it withstood the US pressure for voting, etc., Soviet pressure. Hungary, Nehru called it a popular uprising. Even as recently as Afghanistan, Mrs. Gandhi could tell Brezhnev, and as recently as Ukraine, we have withstood those pressures, but we're just not able to take positions of principle. All these days, what was China doing? It was actually taking its position, whatever it was doing internally, on UN Charter, the accepted principles where you would be right. We haven't even said that, and we go and co-sponsor resolution. And I just feel that Iran is still playing reasonably with us in the hope that as the BRICS chair, we may redeem ourselves. These are all several thoughts and questions, sir. Thank you very much.
Tariffs on India. And he went on imposing one after another. India found, and Mr. Modi was standing between Xi Jinping and Putin. It's recent it is happening. Suddenly we find that Mr. Modi suddenly goes to Israel, and now he stands between Netanyahu and Trump. Now this shift has taken place, you see, in the last, I think, almost 1 year. What do you think is the reason for this shift? Number two, what is your understanding about the visit of Prime Minister and the timing of the Prime Minister to Israel? Because after that, only 36 hours after that, Israel started bombing Iran. So, did we have any information, or what was the reason for the Prime Minister to visit Israel at that particular time? Because I remember one time that when Mr. Vajpayee was a foreign minister and he went to Vietnam, and then Chinese actually, he went to China, and Chinese actually, they did action on Vietnam. So Vajpayee had to come back to India, leaving his tour in between. I mean, is there any connection like this, that when the BJP people go there, something happens?
I'm a non-foreign delegate, so I will like to give a crude remark. Nostalgia can't be a strategy, sir. We have to be realist. We have done enough damage through NAM. Islamic Quad is coming. I don't know why we are not taking notice. How innocent is Iran in this game, especially after post-October 7/23 event, who sponsors terrorism all around any country, be it Israel also, which is also our moral standing. Do you think that India's enigmatic silence and innocence of Iran are comparable? Are we over criticizing the current government? Maybe being realist is not a bad thing at any point of time. Thank you, sir.
That statement itself is the most important statement of these times. Because there is, I'm afraid, a yawning gap between statements that we make about our place in the world and our ability to shape events in the world. This is the gap. Even a weaker India in the past was in a position to bridge the divide between capability and performance, right? Even with the limited capabilities of the past, we were able to in fact take positions which were recognized as being both not just in our national interests, but in a regional context, in a global context. So when we say limitations of Indian power, what exactly are those limitations? Who has analyzed limitations of Indian power? Which professor of international relations, which think tank in this country in the last year or 2 years has actually produced a paper on the limitations of Indian power? If anybody has written that, I would like to read it. Because we are constantly massaging the ego of those who think that we are now something great, a rising power, a leading power, we are on a sweet spot. I think what Trump has done, primarily Trump has done, is to actually, force us to accept the reality of the limitations of our power. He demonstrated that with his actions on trade. We have not been able to deal with the challenge that he posed on trade. We have not been able to deal with the challenge he posed by switching sides on Pakistan. We have not been able to deal with the challenge he has posed in West Asia. Every single challenge that Trump has posed for India has not been able to respond. So when you say we have to deal with China and US in a balanced way, I entirely agree. So what does that mean? It means we do not take positions that you're trying to appease the United States, whether on trade, whether on Pakistan, whether on West Asia. You're trying to appease the United States and constantly complaining against China. Oh, Chinese are doing this, Chinese are doing that. Right. Pakistan is a nuclear power not just because of Chinese. It's a commonly held view that China made Pakistan a nuclear power. China and the United States made Pakistan a nuclear power. So I agree with you, sir. We recognize their limitations, but also deal with both China and US in a more balanced way. I in fact was at a seminar recently in Bangalore at this Takshashila institution where I said, okay, if there's another new G2, a new bipolar, let us have an understanding of how to deal with this new bipolar world. We have dealt with an old bipolar world in which our position was never weak between the Soviet Union and the United States. Today, if it's between China and the United States, there is space for India, provided we are able to approach this bipolarity with greater confidence, rather than behave as supplicants to the United States in the name of realism. I mean, this realism is the most abused word. What does realism mean? Right. So that is my on IMEC, there was no need. There was no need for Jaishankar in Maldives 2 weeks or 10 days back or 1 week back to talk about IMEC and I2U2. What is the reason? What is the provocation to address an Indian Ocean conference and refer to these initiatives with respect to West Asia? So we are constantly trying to signal to the Americans that we are still with you. We are still with you on Quad. We still want a Quad foreign ministers meeting. What will Quad do? What has Quad done? So I think this is what I'm trying to say, that if you recognize your limitations, approach everybody with equal amount of sensitivity rather than constantly please the United States in the name of fear of this, fear of that. And sir, for Global South and all, forget it. I mean, we became the voice of the Global South. When the Indonesian G20 summit failed, we got worried that attendance at the G20 summit in Delhi would also be limited. that neither Biden nor Xi Jinping nor Putin, the three big powers, will not attend. Right? Xi Jinping and Putin in any case did not attend. How did we get Biden to attend? We agreed on signing of the IMEC at the G20 summit. And then we got some traction by getting African Union into G20 and had the Voice of the Global South online summit in the run-up to the G20. So that was very, very instrumental approach to make sure that G20 summit in Delhi at least had one important leader there. If none of them turned up, it would have been worse than Indonesia. And finally, on Prime Minister's visit to Israel, I mean, both of you raised questions about, there are no answers. The only answer I got from someone who tracks the foreign ministry on a daily basis, which is my friend Suhasini Haidar, is, according to her, the Israelis were very, very keen that he should visit. The pressure was coming from the Israelis that please come, and then it's because of that finally went, and now we know why they were Iran. And yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, in fact, the famous statement that Putin told Imran Khan when Imran Khan met him. He said, in 4 days we'll be in Kiev. So that was a similar assessment, that in 4 days we'll be in Tehran. So that's the only thing. But on the larger issue of ideology, yes, there is ideology. Fatherland, motherland, this statement of the Prime Minister, there is ideology. So when you talk of realism, where is realism? When ideology defines your policies, this was not realism. If you want to be realistic, we should not have, from day one, taken sides in the Gulf conflict. We took a whole week to make up our mind. And our response, if it was based on realism, was a response of weakness. Because everybody saw that you took 4 days to even condole the killing of the Supreme Leader. And finally, I think at the end of the day, we have to reassess. I mean, that's not a topic for today. But again, here every day I read newspapers and outputs of think tanks. I have not yet seen a good paper on what should India's policy towards Pakistan be. There is a need for a fundamental reassessment of Pakistan, given where they are today, thanks to so many countries, not just the Chinese, the Americans, the Europeans, the West Asians. I mean, Pakistan is back in the game. Our 10-11-year strategy of marginalizing Pakistan, isolating Pakistan, bad-mouthing Pakistan has failed. So explain what is the future? What should our Pakistan strategy be? These are the questions that this war raises.
The SIOS, Vice Admiral Anup Singh, a former Commander-in-Chief of India's Eastern Naval Command, so brings the wealth of immense practical experience, has commanded 4 warships, led the humanitarian Operation Sukoon to evacuate civilians from Lebanon. His areas of research include maritime economy, maritime security, China's maritime activism, and laws of the sea. He has also authored a book, Blue Waters Ahoy, chronicling India's naval history. Over to you, sir.
I must, apart from thanking the chairman of SIOS, Ambassador Debre, I must particularly thank Dr. Sanjay Baru. By accident, I happened to wear the same color turban as the accidental Prime Minister.
Deliberate.
This morning, I was reminded of the last time in VIF that I had put this on, and I told him I am the accidental chairperson of the session, not a speaker. But thank you very much, and you said so much so correctly. Our problem, I think, is India is living on hope, and hope, ladies and gentlemen, is not strategy. That is where we are going totally wrong. So I'm going to speak on geostrategic quotient of the Hormuz choke point. Just look at this picture and look at the Strait of Hormuz. It is just 21 nautical miles wide and it is not very deep. Most of the... So, despite this constriction, the greatest danger of these constrictions, wherever they exist, is safety of navigation. But look at the amount of oil that has been flowing over the last 40 years in particular. And it is 40 years ago that the world started saying end of fossil fuels, they are left for only 100 more years. Today, the Saudis and the Venezuelans, poor Venezuelans, I hope they become rich once again, are saying we'll live for another at least 100 plus years. So, VLCCs, very large crude carriers, who carry more than 300 million barrels apiece, or ULCCs, there are 4 of them left in the world, they find it very, very difficult to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore the importance of this particular it is the most critical choke point, maritime choke point in the world. Let me therefore first look at this world map of the world. The global economy, lifeblood of the world, rests and moves on the sea. The moment you stop a flow, you are asking for trouble insofar as global economy is concerned. Even for landlocked states. Take the richest landlocked states of Austria, Switzerland, or Liechtenstein, 160 square kilometers alone, or of Bhutan, Nepal, or some other country in our neighborhood. Even their economy, their GDP rests largely on trade through the seas for essential commodities and exports on which the economy lives. Between 37 and 43% of a nation's GDP is dependent on trade through the sea. Now let me talk about the 5 major critical choke points of maritime trade. The first one, which is most well known, is the Suez Canal, part of the Indian Ocean. Red Sea is part of the Indian Ocean. On the other side is the Mediterranean, as you know. Only about 20,000 ships traverse through the Suez Canal in those 3 convoys in a day, 20,000 in a year. And close to $1 trillion worth of cargo gets traded annually. The second one is the Strait of Hormuz. It is the most critical maritime choke point of the world because 40% of oil and gas passes through this. By the way, important fertilizers, helium, and many other commodities also pass through this, including for the United States of America. It's all right for Trump to keep saying that we don't have to bother about the Strait of Hormuz, the rest of the world has to. But actually a lot of it, his farmers must have already started crying horse. The next one is the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, close to the Gulf of Aden. Again about $2 trillion worth of cargo traverses after it comes out or goes into the Suez Canal. And the most critical choke point in our part of the world is the Strait of Malacca. This happens to be the second most important narrow of the world after the English Channel. It is also critical because as you come close to the Singapore Strait, it is just 1.5 nautical miles wide. And the danger of collision and man-made disaster is huge, not just for Singapore and the other economies of the world, but particularly for Japan, South Korea, and China. And of course, another choke point which is critical are the 3 straits in Turkish waters. The Bosphorus, which is very narrow, as 700 meters at one point. The Sea of Marmara is not so narrow, but it leads to the Dardanelles Strait, which is again a little narrow. and only about $300 billion worth of cargo comes out, but some very important cargo of including wheat, maize, steel, and some hydrocarbons will come out of that, the Black Sea. So look at them. Other than the Turkish Straits, everything that I am talking about over here, amongst the 5 most critical choke points of the world, I'm not talking about the Panama Canal, it's only $600 billion between the Gulf Coast and the East Coast of America, and for the Caribbean states, and for Latin American states. The first most dense and critical narrow is the English Channel, but it is wide enough. And there are no states like Somalia or Eritrea, etc., that can cause trouble to the others. The most critical in our part of the world and for most of the developed as well as developing world is the Malacca Strait. So 4 out of these happen to be in the Indian Ocean. Since I am talking about the Indian Ocean, just look at the 3 main oceans, the 3 major water bodies of this world, which allow transaction of goods and commodities. The Indian Ocean is the smallest of them, at just 68.8 million square kilometers, as against the Pacific, which is 155 million square kilometers. Look at the Pacific and the Atlantic. They've got gateways to north, to south, and to the east and west from the north as well as the south. The Indian Ocean has a roof over its head, provided by the Indian Peninsula and West Asia, which is the worst, not a good thing at all for a water body, not to have open windows and gateways. So, what does the Indian Ocean, how does it allow shipping to transit in and out of the Indian Ocean? Anybody who has to go from the Pacific to the Atlantic or vice versa have no alternative but to go through the Indian Ocean. Therefore, despite being the smallest, it carries the largest amount of cargo value, close to $5 trillion, as against the Pacific and the Atlantic. What are these access and exit points available in the Indian Ocean if there are no gateways? 8 choke points. The Cape of Good Hope is the only one which is a half choke point because it got land only on one side. But hardly anybody uses it, except those who provide oil to us and to China in Angola or Nigeria or elsewhere. Everybody else is dependent upon the Suez Canal, the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, the Mozambique Channel, the Strait of Hormuz that we are talking of today, the Malacca, Sunda and Lombok Straits. These 8 choke points are the only ones that allow access or exit from and to the Indian Ocean. The most critical choke point once again is the Strait of Hormuz. This picture is 15 years old. When 15 million barrels per day of oil used to transit out of the Hormuz, 3 through the Suez Canal, 2.5 through the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, and 14 all told through the Malacca Strait in particular, and some through the Sunda and Lombok as well. Today, that picture has changed. 20 million barrels, in fact, yesterday's news said 21 million barrels per day of oil comes out of the Strait of Hormuz. And 21 passes through the Malacca Strait, destined for China, Japan, South Korea, and many other countries. If the maths don't add up, some of the oil lines of communication, as you can see, come around the Cape of Good Hope from Angola, oil-rich Angola and Nigeria, etc. That's why there is 21 going through the Malacca Strait. This picture tells you a very big story insofar as India is concerned, and it's the neighborhood of India. Almost 1 billion tons of oil moves within the Indo-Pacific each year. India imports almost 90% of its oil demand, oil requirement, which cost us $137 billion last year. 50% of this comes from the Middle East, most of it from the Persian Gulf. Where do these oil lines of communication pass closest to, and therefore create a lot of turmoil amongst those who are transiting and depend on one country for providing maritime security? India. And that's why, because of piracy and other threats after the Iran-Iraq war in the Persian Gulf. So many times there have been tanker wars, as you know. Most of this shipping coming out of the Strait of Hormuz hugs the west coast of India. Therefore, we have to be on guard, not only for our security, also to provide security to international shipping. This is what IRGC published while the war was on, to say, while we close the Strait of Hormuz, those who will either pay some kind of toll at $2 million a piece, a ship, or are allowed by us, meaning Chinese and some others, including Indians, they must follow this route and not the legal traffic separation scheme, which is published by the IMO many, many decades ago. So they basically, they published these routes for going out and coming into the Persian Gulf, which are close to Ladakh and Keshem Islands, rather than much closer to the Omani coast. This is another picture which some people have produced as a perspective. If US Navy ships come anywhere close to the Iranian coast, then IRGC will launch its kamikaze drones and missiles, etc. And the Americans are really worried. Every navy in the world is worried coming anywhere near Iranian coast. Not at this time, not for a long time. Apart from mines. Now, what is a naval blockade? History takes it back to 430 BCE in the Athens versus Sparta wars, when for the first time a naval blockade was exercised, and successfully, and a much smaller army managed to finally throw out the aggressor. And the picture on the upper left quadrant is of the 7-Day War, when the British put the first modern blockade in the 18th century against French coast. And the lower one is at the end of the First World War, British ships against German ships. But today, ships of opposing sides do not interact with each other, because that will be asking for too much trouble. And those days were days of cannons only, 3 nautical miles. At best was the range of the cannon. At best, after the close to the Second World War, ships' guns went as far as 12 to 18 nautical miles. This is a picture of the Iranian ports in the Gulf region. Other than the Caspian ports, because Caspian Sea is a closed sea and therefore the Americans have no way to go inside. Starting from Khurramshahr, and the largest and the most important port of Iran is Bandar Abbas. Chabahar, as you know, is slightly outside the Persian Gulf. So this is a picture that shows you what will America be doing after CENTCOM made its declaration that all Iranian ports will be blockaded. There are 2 types of blockades, actually 3. One is a closed blockade, where you draw lines. As you see, CENTCOM and the Americans have not declared coordinates of this blockade. They have just said all Iranian ports stand blockaded as of Monday. So one presumes that the blockade applies to the entire Persian Gulf coast of Iran on its territorial waters. That means anybody who comes out of those territorial waters or goes in does so at its own peril insofar as the US Navy is concerned. Tanker attacks I spoke about, they have been there. They started first during the Iran-Iraq war, but they've been there off and on just to celebrate Diwali in the Persian Gulf and to cause chaos and economic turmoil for the rest of the world, because insurance rates started going up each time there were tanker wars by Iran, and many shipping crews started protesting that we are not interested in higher salaries for this reason, and we would rather stay back than go into the Persian Gulf. Look at this picture of 2013. This is the Chinese vessel COSCO Asia, carrying about 5,000 containers, which received an assault from the Gaza Strip. And nobody knew who had fired what. Most probably somebody was trying out a shoulder-fired missile. And fortunately, it hit only the superstructure of the merchant ship, where nobody was at that time resting in his cabin, and therefore, and also there was no fire. But imagine if this was a bad assault with bad results. You saw what happened with that evergreen ship carrying about 18,000 containers, whose maximum capacity was 20,000 plus. When, because of the fault on the part of the pilot, not so much the master is always, of course, finally responsible, the ship came at right angles and got stuck with its bow going into sand on one side and the stern going on the other. 6 days cost $54 billion of loss to the global economy. $450 million a day was the loss borne by the Suez Canal Authority. Insurance, after 3 years of fight, paid up some amount, but many other shipping companies filed lawsuits against the Suez Canal Authority that because of you, our ships were stranded inside the Suez Canal or in Port Suez or in Port Said on the northern end. So imagine, and many companies in Europe started telling its ships, go around the Cape of Good Hope. That meant 7 to 12 days of extra passage. Time is money, plus extra fuel cost. This is a picture of one of the first projectiles that hit a merchant ship in the Persian Gulf and it came to a stop. Now, what has the Indian Navy been doing about securing its own waters? As you know, there have been many articles written in the press and elsewhere. We have never even able to breach the 138 magic figure promulgated in the recommendations of the Emergency Committee of the Cabinet 2 years after the 62 debacle. It asked for 42 fighter squadrons for the Air Force. They are lingering at about 26 plus after the MiG-21s have been decommissioned. It asked for 800,000 boots on the ground for the Army, which had less than 50% of that. That's been achieved mainly because, today the Army is about 1.1 million strong, but mainly because of internal security responsibilities. And the Navy in 1963 end was recommended to have at least 138 ship strong force. We breached that figure only twice in the recent past because the number of deletions or decommissionings have always superseded the number of accretions. And that's where capital budget and our procedures require, and we've been saying this for 20 years, require a very serious look with a positive outlook. But in 2017, the Navy started putting mission-based deployments in our areas of interest. That included one ship, not all the time because there are so few ships in the Navy, and it costs a lot of money. Money not of fuel, not of salaries, but money in terms of the capitation cost and in terms of material fatigue. The more you keep a ship all the time running at sea, the faster will be its maintenance cycle and the lesser will be its total operating cycle of life. So this is one kept in the Southwest Indian Ocean near Mozambique, one all the time since 2008 in the Gulf of Aden against piracy. The Chinese have 3 ships, out of which one is a logistic ship all the time. This shows one, but actually we have had 2 ships in the Persian Gulf at a time because of the kind of discipline that prevails, geopolitical discipline that prevails in that area. We withdrew these as soon as these, obviously, no navy has put its ships in the Persian Gulf. One in the Central Indian Ocean between Sri Lanka and Maldives, one in the Bay of Bengal, one in the mouth of the Malacca, which is of very good use, and at least one between the Sunda and the Lombok Straits. You can't keep all these ships all the time on station. We'll be left with no ships for other tasks. So we stagger them based on perception, based on analysis, and based on appreciation. That's how the Navy during Operation Sankalp, since I think 2020 or 21, has been escorting ships whenever there is a crisis in the Persian Gulf or elsewhere. Very close to the merchant ship, particularly ships flying the Indian flag and those which are chartered from other companies carrying commodities for India or cargo for India. Look at this picture which tells you Indian investments exist in 46 hydrocarbon projects across 24 countries. Most of them maritime countries, some are landlocked as well, including in 39 in coastal areas. Second point that needs a lot of critical eye. India is the second largest diaspora in the world who repatriated the maximum amount of money to any country. We superseded China about 6-7 years ago, $135 billion last year. So this is important to understand, because should this crisis continue, it is going to continue, but if it continues and increases in its magnitude of firepower, kinetic energy in the Persian Gulf, what will you think about those in the UAE 4.5 million strong, and in the entire Gulf almost about 8 million, and in the rest of the Middle East hopefully that will not be required, to repatriate them. We'll lose the money and we'll lose jobs. So a lot of people have been saying, how will the Navy do this kind of task? And if the Navy does not have ships, well, the Navy did one in an emergency in 2006 from Lebanon, and Ambassador Neelam Sabharwal is here. One woman army in Cyprus with a 12-year-old Aditi, her daughter, who's I think married by now. So MEA sent an army officer from Egypt to assist, because 4 naval ships were bringing in people from every day from Beirut. But I want to show you this picture because a lot of people say India is incapable of doing things. This is a picture in Jordan in 1990, Desert Shield, just before Desert Storm. And 170,000 Indians were evacuated from Kuwait and Iraq with 488 flights run by poor Air India in 60 days. One of the only good things that happened in the Guinness Book of World Records about India. It was a record. What is the end state of this crisis? You can see that's not a CT scan, it's a simple X-ray of Trump's brain. What does he want? He says, I will move the world like a football. To him, in his last term, I hope you are not transmitting it to Doordarshan. There are some friends and relatives of Trump in India as well. What is his exit strategy? He thinks the chessboard is a carom board. So there is no exit strategy. That's why he's doing what he's doing. The ceasefire is supposed to last till 22nd of April, and he started blockade. He doesn't even understand, even though his advisors keep telling him, pulling him back from the mic to say you cannot blockade a strait. It is an international strait. You can only blockade a coastline of a country. And a blockade is a declaration of war during a ceasefire. So he just doesn't understand. Poor CENTCOM guys don't want to get sacked like that general who was sacked during the war. So therefore they are, obeying. But I think it is not going to wind down too soon. And there are far too many blunders that have been committed, knowingly committed by both the countries, America and Israel. Can you imagine desalination plants? The lifeline in the Gulf, where it's only salt water. He started off with the desalination plant in Iran, bombed it knowingly with precise munitions. And then Iran had to do quid pro quo in some other countries of the Gulf in order to say, you have to put pressure on America to stop this war. And you are hosting bases, military bases of the Americans, so you have to take this. And the worst, of course, was 168 girl childs in Minab school. Inexcusable. But who's bothered? What is the ICJ to America? Even in that good president's time, Ronald Reagan, who was one of the good presidents, apart from JFK, when the Iran-Contra deal went to the ICJ, I think the year was 1984, Sandinista regime. Who was it? Daniel Ortega. And he raised his hand, went to the ICJ, and the ICJ ordered $350 million in reparations to Nicaragua. Reagan said sorry. 1 year later, the Congress insisted that money has to be paid, ICJ or no ICJ, whether you like ICJ or not. And that's how it was paid. So America's had a history of not bothering about international law. And the excuse is we didn't ratify the UNCLOS even though we signed it. That has nothing to do with all this. These are humanitarian causes. Thank you very much.
The role of the navies, including the Indian Navy. But I really wonder, in the present situation, present imbroglio, whether navies of the world, including that of the United States, is really in a position to do much, because they had 2 aircraft carriers first deployed to the Gulf. One had to be sent back to Croatia for repairs. The other one has now come, but that is again berthed or anchored somewhere, I think 200-300 miles away from the Oman Sea, somewhere in the Oman Sea, from the Iranian coast. So the navies are also finding themselves in a way incapable of handling the Iranian attack, and therefore I'm not sure whether the navies will be able to really perform as required. So you have this situation which is going to continue for a while. Depends on what the President Trump thinks, how Iranians react, and the impact of all that on the global economy. I think Trump has been largely persuaded to have his so-called blockade and all that, because he fears that this is already creating havoc in the markets. It is impacting the American economy. The price of petrol in the pump in US has gone up. Inflation is going up. So it's not really only the considerations of some kind of humanitarian consideration that he is trying to put brake on Iran. I think it is also of his own self-consideration. So I think you have a number of factors which are really govern this situation. But Arthur, you wanted to say something about Pakistan in this.
I just wanted to say something of personal experience in Pakistan. It was created on communal basis, and we should be careful that we don't become communalist. And my own experience started in the days of Mrs. Gandhi, when I was Consul General in Karachi. She said these fellows created Pakistan, the Muhajirs were, you give them visas free. We issued huge numbers of visas. People came from Pakistan, met their relatives here, and found their relatives were better off. This is personal experience. What I'm trying to say is don't deal with Pakistan in communal terms. Deal with them as unfortunate people ruled by an army which needs an external enemy. And you will find, I think, what I've learned, and I'm sorry I'm talking on the basis of personal experience, the people who created Pakistan were not the Punjabis, not the Sindhis. It was created by Jinnah and company sitting on what is now India. It was never asked for, and I think my good friends to my left, my friend to my left has been through this experience. So I said, yeah, you got to act tough with Pakistan. Yes, they're a nuclear weapons power. So it's madness to talk of a war. I don't think they are interested, no, we are interested, though we have to be prepared for it and respond to in kind to whatever badmashi they were involved in. The fact of the matter is, I found that Mrs. Gandhi's wisdom in handing out visas to people who created Pakistan, or the Muhajirs who went, was when they came back and saw their relatives rone lage. I'm telling you, these are hard facts I'm putting. So I think let's not become communal in dealing with them. Deal with them on a state-to-state basis. The day you become communal in dealing with them, you become another Pakistan. Sorry, but I wanted to include on this because Vijay Nambiar is here.
I might just say that talking of, you talked about the foundation of Pakistan. Actually, there's a book by Faisal Devji who talks about Pakistan as Muslim Zion. He says the only country which can be compared purely ideologically with Pakistan is Israel. Because that's the only country that is built on the idea, as it were. It is not territorial based. Patriotism of Pakistan was not territorial based, it was religion based. It was like Zionism. So, in fact, having been built with that kind of a thing, and as you said, the founders were not either the Aligarh group or even the Punjabis or the Bangladeshis. The idea came from basically from the Bombay group of people, Jinnah and the Aga Khan and things like that, who were in some ways ideologically the most removed from the Deobandis and things like that. So in a sense the sheer genesis is different, but that's obviously not the subject of today's discussion. And the discussion today is really, as Baru Sahab has said to us, today we have reached a stage where the nature of international diplomacy has changed, and we are actually have in some ways, because of some of our steps in between, we were faltering with the ball. We are nowhere in sight of the diplomacy. And the friends whom we've been berating for the last, not friends, the neighbors who've been berating for the last almost a decade, are actually far ahead of the game than we are. We are not prepared to face with the details, and by calling them names, it's not going to change the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Tempting thing. All right, they played their cards better, but I think what is very important, it's not just their traditional role of working in the Gulf and their personal ties and so on, and also with the Iranian leaders, is the strong backing of China. Whatever persuasion or negotiation they are undertaking, it is with the credibility and its messages that they're getting approved and cleared. And anyway, that takes me back then to an excellent presentation by the the Admiral Anup Singh, and thank you very much, first of all, for always so kindly remember that huge evacuation. Again, at the hands of Israel, of course, never to forget that, I think, on our hapless diaspora in Lebanon. So what this has shown, this whole, whether one thing was consistent with international law, I mean, action of one party or the other, the main thing that seems to come out is that this asymmetrical warfare, I mean, what are the sort of messages and the lessons for us? I think what Iran has just shown with these floating mines, with these other things that they've hidden away. I mean, we're all following the news, I think, in the caves and, rocks and nooks that they, I mean, there's a huge lesson that benefit that Pakistan itself can derive, I think, fighting these tricks and techniques. Is that so really? I mean, they don't need those, bigger, more sophisticated thing, or is it just that we are now getting taken in by the media hype on that?
Taking is that a blockade, as you mentioned, is firstly an act of war. It's a hostile act. So that is one aspect. Secondly, one of the most difficult things when you announce a blockade is to enforce it, no matter how powerful the Navy might be. And from what we read in the media, 6 ships managed to slip past the blockade on the first day itself. How seriously does that undermine the credibility of the US Navy as a force? And how would that be viewed within the US Navy itself? I mean, their own Navy, they're obviously so proud, is getting undermined. That was for one question. Second question I had was about the Combined Maritime Force, which we joined a couple of years ago. We'd stayed away from it for almost 15 years. And then 2 years ago, we became a part of the Combined Maritime Force and Task Force 154, which I don't know if you're still heading or we headed. Is there any likelihood of that getting embroiled in this entire, the CMF, not individual task forces, but the CMF as a whole getting embroiled in this whole imbroglio which is being played out in the Straits of Hormuz? And if so, would we still remain a part of it? Would we get involved in it? Would we like to distance ourselves from it? How would we react to it?
Thank you, Admiral Singh, for that excellent exposition of the topic on Hormuz choke point. I heard you say that this is likely to continue for a certain period of time. And you also mentioned the fact that Iran has also threatened to block the traffic in Red Sea and also in Sea of Oman. Since bulk of what sort of goes through these region, especially Hormuz, is oil, crude oil. First question, sustained presence of parallel navies of Iran and United States, how that could sort of transpire into escalation, but more so because bulk of what gets transported in the region is oil. In case of an oil spill, either from a mine or inadvertent attack or some mischief, how is that going to change power asymmetry of the two sides? Thank you.
I mean, or if any light can be thrown on it. All of yesterday we were delighting in the Chinese tanker, the Starry Night or whatever, sailing through the naval blockade. And by the end of the day, there was news that the Washington Post reported that they turned back. Now, the story behind that, according to Washington Post, was that Trump has spoken to China and said Hormuz was very important. This stance that he had taken was very important. So there's some deal that they have got. I don't know what is if anybody can share anything more on that. Thank you.
So thank you for the excellent presentation. In terms of Hormuz, Iran has two aspects. One is a toll. I mean, there are $2 million, $1 per whatever million barrel. The second is the control of Hormuz. And of course, I suppose the reason why Iran wants, in terms of $2 million, whatever is, in terms of reconstruction of its, whatever damage that has happened to its economy. But I suppose without not having to, agree for this $2 million or $1, I'm sure there can be a finance mechanism that can be found to somewhat compensate in terms of, as quote unquote war reparations with sanctions relief and all that. But then the second part is the control. We have this, you mentioned about the Bosphorus Sea and the Dardanelles Strait. There is this 1936 convention, Monterey Convention, which basically kind of says the movement of Black Sea through the Strait of through the Bosphorus Strait to the Sea of Marmara, then to Dardanelles to Mediterranean, and that gives us certain kind of rights for Turkey in terms of what kind of things that it can have during the normal time and during the war time as well, and also controls a specific provision for countries which are littoral in the Black Sea. So can that be some kind of a modification? Because as I said, there are two aspects. One is the toll, the other aspect is the control. So on the control part, can this kind of a thing be some kind of a model that one can work on? Can it be a template? That's something I would like to know from you. Thank you.
You have this precedent in the sense of toll from Turkey. So perhaps that could be negotiated or discussed. I don't know, given the situation.
Sir, I believe Turkey does not charge a toll.
Yeah.
I believe what they do is they need to kind of maintain a certain aspect for which certain charges are paid. So I suppose the money is paid only, by Suez Canal, which of course is a man-made canal, and Panama Canal, which is also a man-made canal.
See, controlling a strait would require an amendment to the UNCLOS, and that itself will be a very, very big thing now. You can't really go back now, unravel UNCLOS on that. So, Iran's claim to control this strait will not be tenable. I don't think so.
Iran has been talking with Oman.
No, that is the toll part. But controlling, because the strait is international waters, there is an overlapping claim between Oman and Iran, and under the innocent passage and transit passage. Now, innocent passage, the restriction can be perhaps accepted. But not under the transit passage. Transit passage is a right it is a right given to all the countries for smooth trade, and therefore transit passage there will be no exception made.
So I believe what the Monterey Convention does is that during the normal time there is an innocent passage for all the ships. There is no question asked. But then in terms of naval ships movement, there is a special provision which is given for countries which are littoral to the Black Sea, which includes, I think, if I remember right, Russia as well. So they have a certain kind of possibility to get them in. But then if there are other countries who are not littoral to Black Sea, if they wish to send their naval ship, there are restrictions, and Turkey can impose a certain restriction. And in the case of a war situation, if Turkey is involved in a war or whatever, at that time they have a full right. So I suppose, that is what that convention is. So I'm just wondering, incidentally, as we all know, UNCLOS is not signed neither by US, not Iran has signed it but not ratified it, and I think US did not even sign it. So that's the kind of a situation. So I don't know. I'm just only saying that it's something one can kind of factor in.
Been talking of UNCLOS and the fact of violation of the UNCLOS by the parties concerned. Short term, it's an evolving kind of situation, and hopefully things should settle the way it does. But going interest in the area, we have to start thinking of what the future scenario is going to be. And if at all, UNCLOS has done a lot of good to the entire world, the kind of stability it has given. And therefore, we possibly can't get into a situation where the whole thing is undone. And therefore, I think it's time we start thinking of what is the kind of architecture we got to put in place, particularly in the Arabian, in our region. And therefore, we have to be thinking on that and maybe build up a consensus of whatever powers that be. It can't be left to the warring parties to be there for all times. And therefore, I think there is a reason to start seriously thinking of how to make UNCLOS working once again. So I just thought if you can have your views on that.
What has happened in the last month mean for Indian Navy in terms of its relations with the Indian Ocean littoral?
From the start of the Russo-Ukraine war, we've been trying hoarse to say, I think we were all sleeping. It is the day now, the era now that starts. Maybe somebody said, not the era of war when 51 proper wars are already taking place, but is of asymmetric warfare by the lesser have. And that's where the Ukrainians started with what we call MDF, Gatta. Drones made out of MDF because they didn't have material, they didn't even have technology. But by reverse engineering some drones, they created drones at not $5,000, at $500 worth. And that created havoc for Russia to start with. You remember that in 2023, Russia had started getting drones out of Iran, which were with Chinese technology. And they still continue to do so. The second question you asked about was the Chinese tanker. I think there is a lot of behind the scenes business between America and China, not only because Trump is traveling there for next month and he is eagerly waiting and hoping that it doesn't get stalled by any other activity, but also because, and on the surface they have agreed, 100% sure, between Xi and Trump, they have agreed that on the surface we'll keep barking at each other. So yesterday he said if China tries to do quiet, toll-free passage of its tankers, then I will increase the tariffs by 50%. This is all humbug. So the Chinese have been allowed, and I am certain things will come out in less than a day through satellite information and AIS, etc. Things will come out and they'll surface that more than just one tanker a day is passing through the Suez, through the Hormuz for China. Whether it is a dark ship which switches off its identity, but it's with handshake with America as well. There is no doubt about it. It happens to China, it will not happen to India so openly. The Americans are great at, today's Americans are great at doing all this. AJ, you asked about the blockade. You are right. I did not complete that sentence when I started saying there are three types of blockades. A closed blockade where the Navy is seen to be believed, as it happened during the Israel-Hezbollah war, and Beirut harbor did not see a man around till the Indian Navy brought its ships in. And they drew a rectangle around Beirut, going south by about 60 nautical miles from Beirut harbor, and about 35 nautical miles into the Mediterranean. That was a large size. And who was controlling it? It was a closed blockade, C-O-L-S-E, not in the past tense. That means that it had to be a blockade as defined to be not only supervised but controlled. So two small vessels, Israel till this day does not have a frigate. It's got only corvettes and below. Two small vessels, one commanded by a lady officer of the IDF, were on the line, whether in pitch dark night or during daytime, saying, vessel crossing the blockade northeast corner, identify yourself. And if you enter, you will do so at your peril, without permission. So the Indian ships were saying, identified so-and-so, and we've got permission. Fortunately for us, we had good relations with Lebanon as well as Israel. And then she would turn around and say, all right, please traverse within 2 nautical miles of the western leg, not more. Because the Israeli Air Force was flying its F-16s all the time, and their ships had some missiles. That is a closed blockade. The other one is a distant blockade, is what Mr. Trump is doing, even though he, rolls out a lot of his tongue on this is what we have done and it's lying at the bottom of the sea and so on and so forth. The third type of blockade is Pacific blockade. The first two, when you declare a blockade, you announce a blockade, you are declaring war, which itself is an anomaly because there is a ceasefire on. Secondly, the Pacific blockade, the only example of the Pacific blockade is the quarantine announced by JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But there also he came under a lot of criticism from across the world that you couldn't have done a thing like this. You caught some neutrals, took them aside, boarded those ships and found nothing like Russian missiles, and then you let them go. That is not quarantine. What we did, because there is a sensitivity of blockade means declaration of war. In 1971, the first blockade was announced on the 4th morning, 12 hours after Pakistani Air Force carried out its counter-air strikes on our airfields. We announced a blockade on West Pakistan, up to 100 nautical miles away from Karachi down. And by that evening, because of the army war room where all three chiefs and the Prime Minister used to be sitting, when this was detailed as to what are the implications of declaring a blockade, it means war. The Prime Minister said, and some of our advisors, no, war has been started by them, remove the term blockade. So the Chief of Naval Staff said, all right, we will do contraband control, which does not mean, but the implications of contraband control are exactly the same as blockade. It's only terminology in the law of naval blockade. You also asked about the CMF. Now, here you said, how will they carry out blockade? As I said in the presentation, in that slide where there is a red territorial water line, that they will not come anywhere close to it. They won't even come within 200 kilometers as I can see, because they're worried about IRGC and its missiles and kamikaze drones. They will do a distant blockade. And at best, they will send their aircraft, manned or unmanned, to do surveillance. As you know, their MQ-9B, 31 of which we are buying at some huge amount for the three services. 3 of them have been shot down by the Iranians, which even the European NATO powers are rarely surprised about. So the good thing that happened to Iran was the 12-day war, because firstly, it appreciated what was coming as an onslaught, a different kind of a desert storm. And secondly, it had time to converse with the dialogue with the Chinese, and therefore it prepared itself. Numbers, numbers and numbers. The era today, as Ambassador Neelam Sabharwal had asked as a second question, is of drones, asymmetric warfare. Drones, drones and drones is what we need. Now it is no more a secret that during Operation Sindoor, we found ourselves terribly wanting in terms of a stable of drones. You need drones in the air, drones on land and drones underwater for surveillance as well as kamikaze business. There is no good boy in the business of war. You have to do what is possible to do, not what is allowed by rules. In any case, nothing bad stops you from doing all this. The second question, AJ, you had asked was of CMF, Combined Maritime Forces. As you know, you rightly said that just 2 years ago we joined them. All this while we were keeping away from CMF from the first invitation by Pentagon in the year 2005 to say, why don't you join us? It is supposed to keep a rules-based order. We have to kill the hash highway along the Makran coast, which is bringing in all kinds of opiates from Afghanistan along Pakistan, supported by Pakistanis, and we have to stop them. So we told them, sorry, our policy is to go only under the UN umbrella. We don't join any coalition forces. From coalition, they called it Combined Maritime Forces. The other reason we told them that this is no secret. When you have Pakistanis who can't be trusted for anything as part of CMF, and particularly there's a rotational chairpersonship. We cannot be under them. Secondly, we don't trust them. So you cannot exchange pictures with them. But CMF 154 is on training. So there's hardly any business. 151, which is on maritime security, cannot be thinking, including the French, the British, the Italians, they'll say, sorry, till this thing settles down and you people, the Americans, or the Japanese agree, bring in their minesweepers and declare the Persian Gulf completely, the Strait of Hormuz completely free of mines, and there is no threat from IRGC, we are not sending our ships in. So in our case, we will certainly not go till everything smoothens out. Professor Swaran Singh had asked for Iran too has threatened. I think what you asked was, since the US Navy is present, the Iranians, most of their Navy is gone. The rest, which is probably existing in the Caspian Sea, yes, there is smaller vessels. They can't travel over land and come out into the sea. In any case, they are very small corvettes. The others, if they have hidden them somewhere, whether inside Chabahar or somewhere else, they are insignificant. But the IRGC has a hidden arsenal of all kinds, unmanned, whether it is missiles or drones, etc. And we will not go anywhere near. Then there is, what is going on right now, I think by IRGC itself, the ruse will work. Whether the threat of use of their force will work against the Americans. You also asked about oil spills. Oil spills. If you recall, somewhere in 88 or 89, there was a huge oil spill, the largest in the world, by ExxonMobil. The name of the very large crude carrier was Exxon Valdez, carrying about, I think, 200 million barrels of oil. And it had an oil spill because the master was too happy having gone to Anchorage and stayed there for 2 days and opened his bar even while leaving harbor. And he was already drunk from the previous night. So he didn't bother to listen to the pilot, and he ordered and went on a creek, on a reef. So most of the oil was spilled. Exxon finally paid up, I think, close to $1 billion in damages after a court case. That kind of thing, everyone is very scared of in the Persian Gulf, including Iran. They don't want blood on their hands because it will take ages from those waters which are not hit too many times by storms for the swell to carry it along. Ambassador Swami, a very important point. The Montreux Convention of 1936 lays down, firstly, there is no toll. All international states under UNCLOS and even before UNCLOS came into being in the 80s are supposed to be free passage, including archipelagic straits of Indonesia, which are internal waters. So they gave it on a platter to the UNCLOS. And it is amazing that a country like Indonesia, which at that time was under General Suharto, did not object to giving their internal waters. And that's how you have the Lombok, Sunda and Ombai Vetar. Find it very difficult to pronounce at times. Used by international shipping. The Montreux Convention was with a purpose after the experience of the First World War and short of the Second World War. Any foreign warship which goes into any, whether on a goodwill visit or otherwise, for any purpose, into the Black Sea, can stay inside only for 21 days. After that, they will be stopped by the Turks. Unless there should be a diplomatic sort of handshake, or some penalties will have to be paid to the Turks. So it is a crime to remain inside for more than 21 days. That is the restriction. The other restriction that was laid down was there will be no offensive platforms made inside the Black Sea. And if they are made, they will not come through the Bosporus Strait. That is why the Soviets, when they came out with their first aircraft carrier, the only place they could build was in Sevastopol, in the large shipbuilding yards in Sevastopol. They called it Large anti-aircraft, anti-submarine cruiser. So it said Veliki Bolshoi Protivolodochny Karavel Racer. And they quietly brought out their carriers from there. You were also talking about can some restrictions and controls. It goes against international states and its definition, not by IMO but by UNCLOS. It's free passage, nobody can have control. There is one man who tried this control, almost successfully. Beni Murdani, who was a general in the Indonesian Armed Forces, he became their Chief of Defense Forces, and thereafter Suharto made him the Defense Minister. So Beni Murdani, in September of 1988, while Suharto was attending the UN General Assembly in New York, he issued a NOTAM plus other orders to the international community to say, from so-and-so date to so-and-so date, 3 patches of 4 days in September, the Lombok Strait will be closed because of air-land battle exercises by the Indonesian Armed Forces. Everyone was shocked. 4 days later, Gareth Evans flew down from Australia to say, what are you doing? This is the only passage. And Japanese huge ships were stuck on both sides of the Lombok, those bringing oil from the Persian Gulf and those taking goods, VCRs and television sets and automobiles to be sold to the rest of the world. They were stuck. At the end of the first such period of 4 days, Suharto came to know, so he rang him up and said, stop all this, why are you doing it? He said, to show to the world, these are our waters. There may be archipelagic straits, but after that it hasn't happened. It took Beni Murdani to do it. It required Beni Murdani to do it. Dr. Sanjeev Ranjan made some very good points. I think we have to start thinking on what kind of architecture. And this architecture will not come out of Quad, as you rightly said, Dr. Baru, nor anything akin to that. It has to come out with the right kind of minds, minus the US, not because of Trump, minus the US, for all times. Minus the US and only with regional actors. I think Bandaranaike can be brought out of a grave and told to talk about zone of peace, which was accepted by the UN almost unopposed. And we have had some very good statements made in the past about what needs to be done in the Indian Ocean. There is no place here for outsiders to extraterritorial powers to come away. We have to start. Thank you.
Okay, Anuji. Thank you very much. Would you like to comment on his question?
So I think Admiral Anu Singh has covered almost all the questions very well. I can add a few comments on certain questions if you permit me to, or I'll speak later when I'm giving my Q&A.
Okay, fine. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think both the presentations were excellent, as well as, of course, all the questions which were raised and the answers which were given. I just have a sort of short comment, a few short comments to make. I think the implications of what is happening at the Strait of Hormuz has been very widely covered by both the speakers. One section which I think was not mentioned, but perhaps it was an oversight on my part that I didn't notice it, is the effect on the seafarers. Because as we all know, 1 in every 7 seafarer in the world is an Indian. I think there's been a major effect on many of these seafarers who are in fact landlubbers. They all come from our hinterland states, and they're all deeply affected by what has happened, including those who have died in some of the attacks which have taken place. The other thing is the question which I would like to ask Admiral Anup Singh is the question of what flags do these ships carry? I mean, most of these ships which are owned by one country, they are registered in fact in very obscure places. So what flags are they? I mean, when you talk about an Indian ship or a Chinese ship or whatever, so their ownership may not matter as much as where the places where they are registered, and in which case, I mean, who takes over what has happened? I mean, who looks at it as a belligerent act? You know, is it the country which owns it, or the country where it is registered? So that is one question I thought I should ask. Of course, the other short point on the Montreux Convention is, which probably, I don't know, maybe it's already been made, is that there's only one country which is involved. So on both sides of both the Dardanelles as well as the Bosphorus, is only Turkey. So perhaps it's easier to have that kind of a convention and to be able to implement it. Whereas here it's Oman, and of course Oman might be happy to have that kind of a convention, but whether everybody else is in agreement with it. And fourthly, I mean, do we see an opportunity for India in what is happening here in the conflict? Because all these cities of the Gulf, I mean, they were huge successes, but was their foundation, very fragile? Because they were ephemeral in a sense. Their success, and having seen the way the fleeing of capital from many parts of the world to concentrate on all these countries which are really don't even have drinking water. What kind of a foundation is that? Including our own, many of our top industrialists, I think, have all shifted base. It's a haven for celebrities of all kinds. Is this a sort of sign that there might be a revival of, say, our own cities? Mumbai is a huge transportation hub. Delhi again, of people coming back to see in many parts of the world which have been neglected by us. It might seem very idealistic and naive, but I think it is very clear, because I understand, for example, many of the British top people have actually gone back, and they probably now are working from somewhere else, in many of the British isles, etc., which are also equally good safe havens. Maybe not having such good weather, but providing. So perhaps Mr. Baru would like to answer that particular question. Thank you.
But let me say, even as we are talking now, I was just reading the Tehran Times. All these people are there right now, and they have been there throughout. They are in constant touch. But the main player in this has been really China. China and the United States. And they have been the main players. And the agreement was reached some years back. It coincided with, you remember the PDNS which was held the year after Xi Jinping took over. The same thing applied there, because that time there was an agreement between Russia and China and it was basically military, but it was beyond military. It was basically geo-strategic agreement of an understanding of working in concert. And that's where, there were question marks even about the Quad and etc. at that particular point of time. So they have been working in very much in concert, and I believe that China did not do anything at all without consulting Russia. Second thing I just want to mention very, very briefly is when Sanjay was mentioning about what we did or did not do in different circumstances. At one point of time when we needed the Soviet Union the most, this was in 1971. We were negotiating the Indo-Soviet Treaty, also signed August, and then you had Nixon, Kissinger going there. Shortly before that, we got a request from the Soviet Union, and not just Admiral Gorshkov, who personally floated it. They wanted just a logistic foothold in India for their navy in order to provision some of their, that is, short-term logistics. And Indira Gandhi said no. She said, and throughout that time, basically no basis. Another aspect I want to bring out in a disjointed manner is, so we said no to that at that particular point in time. Must be remembered when we needed it the most. And they appreciated it, they got the point. Second, when you talk about the Indian Ocean, the zone of peace or whatever, basically we said no to the big powers at that time. Big powers were basically the Soviet Union and America. We said we are saying this about Diego Garcia, but it applies to Kamran Bay also. So we made that point. I don't want to go into details because each single point I can elaborate, but these were two of the things.
Thank you very much. We had, I think, very wide-ranging discussion, very open, free discussion.
Warming up.
It is warming up now. We have actually a large number of students. We didn't ask them whether they had any views and comments, but I think we'll do it after lunch. So I would invite all of you to have lunch down there next to the library. Thank you.